We have a quorum. Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda, I hope? If so, if I could ask for a motion to get the agenda approved.
This is Sally Riley. I'll move to approve the agenda for November 18th meeting.
And this is Jason. I'll second.
Thank you. Any comments on that? If not, all those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes. Agenda passes. Thank you. All right, any public John, how quickly are you wanting to move
Well, I think if we could move
right now?
Shane up to the front, that'd be great. I was there.
Shane, are you prepared to go now?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I appreciate it. If you guys are ready, sure, we can go now.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you guys accommodating me. I've got a public meeting at Fair Play I get to go to this afternoon, evening. So I'll be leaving shortly after this meeting to head to Fair Play. So I really do appreciate this. So this is an informational discussion about our next fiscal year of RPP coming up, and also a redistribution of some RPP that we get to redistribute. If you guys remember, as part of the Senate Bill 260, Airport and Powers got allocated $4 million of funding for design. We had originally had $4 million identified in RPP fiscal year 24 and 25 for design on that project in particular. And so now that it's funded through 260, we are going to redistribute that fiscal year 24 and 25 funding. In addition to that, we will be looking at fiscal year 26 and just the distribution of funding that's being allocated to PPACG as well. Again, today is an informational. Wendy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it will be next month. We'll get a thumbs up, thumbs down on the plan moving forward. I do want to note that this RPP, it can be utilized for 10-year projects, or it can be utilized for staging of other projects. I will say, from my perspective, my desire for RPP in general, my philosophy for RPP in general is to use it in twofold. One is a contingency for construction projects and also community projects that may come up from time to time. But the second part is really to stage design for some of these larger capital projects and get them either in the preliminary stage or prep them for getting to advertisement as much as we can ahead of some of these larger lump sums of funding that comes down the line. And I'll give the example of, again, I think I've spoken to this in the past, the Research and Powers. It was truly staged and ready to go when we got the COVID relief funding that came in play. And it just a matter of 2 to 3 months that since it was already designed and ready to go, we were able to get that project out of construction. And so I really want to be able to set the stage for some of our future projects, our larger capital project in that same manner, understanding that greenhouse gas and the bills and everything else that comes our way may shift and adjust some of these priorities. And there is flexibility within the plan moving forward. So I will ask, I don't know if Jessica, if you're running the show or if you would like for me to run the show here, but I'll like to get to my spreadsheet. I believe that was part of the packet.
Yeah, so I think Will's is hopped into the hot seat and he's going to look at that up. Hey,
There
Shane,
we go.
real quick, while you're doing this, we do have this included in the 10-year plan item, which we had marked for action. So if this is a component of the package that doesn't need to be approved on today, that's great. But just want to give Wendy a heads up that we thought that this was under that whole that 10-year package, which we thought needed to be approved today. So when Shane's done, Wendy, if you could sort of walk us through what we need to approve today and what we don't, that would be great. So go ahead, Shane. Sorry to interrupt.
So Shane's piece is still under advisement, like he said, but the other sheet that has the FASTR and the HSIP would be moving forward.
Okay. And the
So real quick, is that the less complicated spreadsheet, Wendy?
It's the one that's not on the screen.
The kind of yellow and gray and
Yes,
green?
exactly. Yes.
I thought they were all complicated spreadsheets.
Right. So, Will, I may ask you to zoom in towards the bottom. So This is Region 2's RPP plan as a whole that has all the TPR as well as the 2 MPO locations. And on this first sheet, the bottom half has PPACG's plan and allocation, as well as this on the top of the second sheet. And across the columns, you'll have fiscal year, I believe, we got 24, 23, 22 through 30 are the different column colors, okay? And so within the PPACG, you'll see below some of these projects look familiar to you: State Highway 21 corridor, US 24, and 21st Street improvements, et cetera, on down. If you get about halfway down the PPAC column where you have the first red highlighted TBD, that is essentially our sub-account numbers or our number identification. That is State Highway 21 interchange at Airport Road, right? And originally we had for fiscal year 24 and for 25, we had $2 million allocated for both of those 2 fiscal years for that project for a total of $4 million. Since, and what I'm showing in this spreadsheet is that striked through, correct? So that is basically saying we do not need that funding for that project anymore. And so the redistribution that I've put on in front of you today is down at the bottom. So Will, I'll ask you to scroll back to the left. Whoop, sorry. At the very bottom red TBD is the first project that I'm looking to redistribute some of the funding for. And that's I-25 safety and operational improvements between South Academy and Circle and Lake. And if you guys are familiar with that section of the corridor, that's the last piece that will be 3-lane through the I-25 corridor that is part of the original EA on I-25. There's quite a bit that needs to happen along that corridor. We have sound walls. We have 2 bridges that will take a significant amount of time and coordination to replace, which is one of being a railroad spur, as well as the 85 bridge. And we feel like that we can approach it in stages. We're similar to MAMSIP, where we would look at 12-foot shoulders and addressing the bridge replacements and potentially the sound walls in a phase 1, and then coming back and having a graded, coming back with paving for the turning those shoulders into the travel lanes and paving for shoulders at this in a second phase, if you will, to get that into essentially a 2-phase project, depending on how fast we can get some of the structures and et cetera taken care of. Again, one of the biggest concerns there is really addressing the timeline and getting that bridge that goes into Fort Carson, that railroad spur bridge, and designing that and getting that coordinated. That's going to be a significant effort. And so for fiscal year 24, we've redistributed of that $1 million. And in a fiscal year 25, redistributed of that $2 million, $1.5 million towards that project. Now, Will, I ask you to go to the second sheet, very top of the second sheet, if you will, please. The second project that we would like to redistribute some of this funding towards is, if you go to the very left again, you'll see the highlighted red. There we go. The very top highlighted TBD. That is State Highway 21 interchange at Milton Proby Parkway. I've asked for the redistribution to go $1 million towards fiscal year 24 and $500,000 for fiscal year 25 at this time. The reason being is, again, just similar to what we had discussed earlier for research and powers. Airport and powers is now fully funded for design, and we want to go ahead and start getting that next interchange and start looking at scoping it and doing some preliminary design, survey work, et cetera, and continue to knock off interchange by interchange along that corridor. And the reason for the Milton Proby Parkway is really from our traffic group, just seeing the significant increase in congestion and numbers, especially from the commercial development from Amazon, and that's going to continue to develop in that area, as well as being the entrance to our airport location, community airport. So that takes care of fiscal year 24 and 25 redistribution of that funding that was planned for airport and powers. I can go into fiscal year 26 real quick, unless you guys want to start and have any discussions, because fiscal year 26 is very similar to 24 and 25. We get allotted within PPACG 4.7 million for RPP, which I've got 2.2 towards the Milton Proby Parkway design. And then Will, if you'll scroll back up towards the previous page. Thank you. Whoop. Too far, a little bit down, a little bit further down. There we go. 2 million for that I-25 component. And then I have another 500,000 towards the US 24 over Ridge Road. Now, we'd already planned 1.5 million on fiscal year 25 to go to design, preliminary design for that project. This is just additional funding that I am anticipating needing for that preliminary design for that project. And so those 3 fiscal years, again, Wendy, correct me if I'm wrong, but those 3 fiscal years will be a thumbs up or thumbs down next month. We'll come back to PPACG and ask for approval for this plan of redistribution of 24 and 25 and the plan distribution for 26. In this sheet, you can also see basically a preliminary plan of what we are looking at for fiscal year 27 through 30. That will not be voted on at this time, but that really helps us look and plan down the line as to, you know, what are we looking to achieve not only in PPACG, but as we are distributing it throughout all the other TPRs and MPO. And with that, I think Tim Roberts, you have a hand up. I'll go ahead and answer your question, ask you to ask your question.
You just mentioned 1 million you just mentioned the Ridge Road.
Yes, sir.
And I see, I just lost it. There's what, 4 million in it? Does the total 4 million include the construction?
No. This is all, again, this is all for just design and preliminary and staging of the project. There may be at a point where some of these will be on the shelf to some degree, but again, I'm using the example of Research and Powers that was on the shelf and construction funding became available.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other questions?
Tim, this is John. 2 quick things. First off, I just want to make sure that I'm clear as far as the timing. So you'll come back to the TAC at our December meeting and ask for the thumbs up or thumbs down, which means it will go to our board of directors in January of 2022. That works with your timeline?
Correct.
Is
Okay.
that correct, Wendy?
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
Good. And then the second thing is, I know it's been a while and because of COVID, it makes it more difficult. But at one point there was discussions with Woodland Park about the,
Reliever
are we allowed to call it a bypass? What are we calling it again? It's not a bypass.
Reliever route.
Reliever route, that's right.
Yes.
Because syntax matters.
Mhm.
So have they been able to secure their match funding? And is that part of the plan at this point? Because it's so tiny, I can't read the text.
Yeah, so for fiscal year 25, we have allocated 500,000 for that reliever route for Woodland Park. And that money can be reached, essentially reached July 1st of calendar year 2023.
All right, and that's dependent on them coming up with their 100,000 of local match. Is that correct?
That
Okay,
is correct.
thank you.
Yes, and just to let everyone know, the city council is setting aside 50,000 in 2022. And then we're hoping to be able to generate additional interest or support from Teller County. But we are budgeting for that even as early as 2022 to preserve our match.
This is Tim Roberts. Another quick question. Will that study start any of the environmental clearances?
No. So at this time, and this is per really federal highways, discussions with federal highways and our environmental group. I think for at this time, for a study such as this, we're really looking at, I don't want to say it's environmental clearances, but it's going to be more of like an economic an analysis as far as the impacts upon Woodland Park potentially. Also potentially looking at potential alignments. I don't want to say, decide, determined alignments and that type of thing, but in also kind of setting that stage, if you will, in a lot of the upfront work. I don't want to call it PEL. I don't want to call it any other environmental document, but it's really a corridor study. And my understanding when it comes to when we start labeling some of these documents more towards the environmental side of things, I mean, there's an expectation of construction funding to be committed sooner than later, and I don't think we're at that point with this particular project yet. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I just worry that personally selfish driving west from Colorado Springs is going to be like 20 years before we see it. And with the greenhouse gas, I'm just inquiring. Thank you, Shane.
Absolutely.
Could anyone else make out what he said? Because I couldn't. Can you either repeat that or someone who did hear it, repeat it for us?
Yeah, I'll repeat. I was just being selfish, saying that wanting it to happen sooner than later since I travel west. And I appreciate Shane sharing the information.
You're not being selfish. Just asking a question. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay. Well, if no other questions, I appreciate your time. And I really appreciate you guys allowing me to jump in here to be ready for my next meeting coming up in
Shane,
Fairpoint.
before you go, don't forget,
Yes.
you have to do this for CAC and you have to come back to the board in early December to have the same informational item conversation.
I know.
Okay, I'm just making sure, just making sure.
Yeah, no,
I
we're
didn't
good,
want you to
Wendy.
think you could leapfrog over.
No,
go
no,
directly
no.
to go without having to
Collect.
yeah, you collect your $200.
I got
Okay,
you.
Shane.
We're good.
Thank you.
Hey,
Thank
Shane,
you.
Shane, before you get off real quick, this
Yes,
is Brian Vituli with Mountain Metro Transit. So I know this list is the 10-year roadway plan. I mean, is there going to be a similar process to update the transit development plan as well?
So right now we've not allocated any RPP for the transit side of the house. And so with respect to the 10-year plan, I think I'd defer to John and or Wendy to really discuss if there's updates to additional 10-year planning within the area. But for RPP, which I just discussed, that regional priority project or project priorities, I would say that is not allocated to transit.
Okay, yeah, I apologize if you said that early on, but yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep.
Brian, I think Jeff is on the meeting, so he might be able to give us some insight into anything he knows. Jeff
Okay.
Guthrie.
The short answer, Brian, is that let me reach out to you. Let's talk after this, and let's rope in Division of Transit and Rail because they have brand new planning staff.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, board members. Appreciate your
All right.
time.
Thank you, Shane. Oh, John?
So, yeah, thanks, Shane. So, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I think Shane was only part of this, so I think it'd be appropriate to go ahead and keep this all together. And now I'll hand it over to Wendy to handle the other 4 or 5 sheets of not as complicated spreadsheets, I believe is what we're calling them, to then finish out this item. Is that appropriate, Wendy? Because you have more to talk about, don't you?
Well, I was looking to see if Matt was on the meeting, because not Matt Pettit, but Matt Jago, because Matt should be covering this today. Because I don't know anything about what he has on the spreadsheet, to be honest with you, and I don't see him.
If you wouldn't mind scrolling down, maybe I can chime in.
Do you
just a
know
little
something
bit.
about them, Shane?
I'll take a look real quick to see
Okay.
if there's any of these projects that come up.
It's on the yellow one. Well,
Not this
So
one.
I think this is the old one, right? So we have the old roadway and the old transit. And partly to your question, Brian, PPACG as an entity does need to refresh our 10-year plan for both roadway and transit. So we have them in there. So I think this is the old one. Is that correct, Wendy?
Yes.
Or
I
change?
believe that's correct. Yeah.
So
Yes.
keep scrolling, Jess. And this is the old transit. So keep scrolling.
Then it gets complicated again.
Yeah.
This one. This is the one.
This is the more complicated one or less complicated one. I guess it depends on your point of view. So Shane, can you talk about this one, or
Hey.
Wendy?
You need to go down a little bit more to get to the bottom here where PPACG is. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't, no one can read it, so we'll take your word for it.
So I think he has a Powers Medium Barrier Design Project. So we'd
Yeah.
just be looking at 26. And then he has something on 24 East, he has Judge Orr. And the MLK Bypass Barrier Design.
Let me see if I can pull it up on my own.
And Green Mountain Falls, something at Green Mountain Falls, but I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah, these
Oh,
are
design phase. Okay, I see.
Wendy, is there a particular shade or color or something I can draw my attention to?
So it's PPACG in the middle of the page. It's
Just that.
faster money, FSA, and then it's fiscal year 26, which is
Very-
underneath.
column to the very right.
Correct.
There are two sets of columns.
It's kind of the gray, is it the gray ones?
Yeah. Okay. So I can talk through some of this. Yeah, that South Powers, granted, these are again faster projects. It's really medium barrier, I believe. And I thought that was supposed to be State Highway 16, actually, that section from I-25 to where it becomes Powers and proper. And I think that 873,000 is really going to be for design funding. I'll scroll down to the next one, which is that 6.3 million. Let's see here. Judge Orr Road improvements, right? Okay. So that project is, again, that's another faster safety project. And it's really an additional 6.3, and this is going to be part of the construction funding. So you can see in fiscal year 24, we have about $3.6 million allotted to the project, which part of that is going to be utilized for design. And then the remaining portion of that would be included with that 6.3 to be included in the construction of that Judge Orr Road intersection improvements. Included in that obviously is the right-of-way phase and design phase. And so that is that 6.3 allocation of faster safety. And then scroll here. The gray sections, to my understanding, is these are projects that are not approved faster projects yet. They are pending the application approval process. And so we can go through those in a little bit if you'd like. I don't see any other PPACG on fiscal year 26.
So you're absolutely right. So it's basically just the two that are above, that are
Yeah.
not gray, that we have to have
Right.
action upon.
And do these go through the selection projects from Performance Directive 16 or whatever it is? And these are the PPACG projects that have shaken out from that?
Correct.
So
Correct.
really, so this again is one of those things where, based on the federal process, where we're collaboratively and cooperatively doing a program, you're bringing us these projects and saying, we've gone through Performance Directive 16. These are the two projects that have shaken out as the priority. And we're being asked to concur with that. If we don't
Correct.
concur with that, then you would go back to the process, and the next projects down the list through Performance Directive 16 may not be from this region. So I think,
Correct.
so again, you guys are very careful with your wording, and you got to be careful how you say it. So I'll just go ahead and say it because I'm not as careful. Hey guys, this is the projects we're going to get. I don't think there's too much that you have a lot of leeway and discussion on. So I don't think we need to waste a lot of time on this. Let's maybe move on to the next one. But if anyone else has specific questions, we can certainly take the time on that. But I think our time would be better spent on spreadsheets that we do have some input on that aren't necessarily derived by a performance directive that is already set in stone, so to speak.
And is that part of this item, John, or is that something totally different?
I will defer to Wendy, but I think this is part of the item, right? Basically, CDOT says, hey, in development of our 10-year plan, I'm sorry, Dole, as part of our 10-year plan, these are the projects that we're forwarding. The ones that we've already talked about from Shane is from the RPP bucket of money, and that doesn't have to be done right away. We're going to see that again next month. Now we've moved on to the next spreadsheet. This is the faster safety money that comes from Performance Directive 16, which basically, the way I understand it, is that the Region 2 kind of looks at all of their projects within their region. They run it through a priority screening based on criteria that's been approved by the Transportation Commission. And then the projects that sort of bubble up to the top are the ones that get funded. Some years we get projects, some years we don't. Some years we get more than quote unquote our fair share. It just has to do with how, I was almost going to say the word crappy, but that's not appropriate, how poor your roads are. And we have a couple of poor roads that justify funding, therefore they'll be on the list. So we could technically say we don't want these projects done, but the way the process works, we're not allowed to choose new projects in their place. Instead, the Performance Directive 16 criteria would then be applied, and the projects that then fill in and take their place would be not necessarily in PPACG, they could be in Pueblo. So
Right.
it's probably in our best interest.
Yeah, I get all of that, John. And then at the end of what you said first, you mentioned, let's save our time for projects we can actually talk about that we have some impact on. And I asked, are those projects that we can actually talk about part of this agenda item? Or are they something completely different?
Yeah, and Wendy, if you can answer that, because I don't know what's on the other 3 or 2 spreadsheets, but are the other spreadsheets things that we do have input on, Wendy?
So the
or-
other spreadsheets were Shane's, they were the original layout from Shane's original plan. So what he showed you was what was originally planned. He showed you how it's going to change. And then these two projects would need to have a thumbs up to move forward so that I can put them into the STIP for 2026. And I believe that takes care of everything that was in that spreadsheet grouping.
So somehow with these last 2 spreadsheets, Wendy, you're going to take that information and add it to that pipeline spreadsheet.
I'm going to take the projects on this spreadsheet and I'm going to add them to the STIP so that they need to be entered into the TIP. Those 2 faster projects that are on here for 2026.
But they're not
The construction-
necessarily part of our 10-year pipeline, are they?
Correct.
They are not.
Okay.
This is essentially more of our traffic and safety projects that we get, like I said, either HSIP or faster safety funds on it. So
So Shane, so I'm clear, does that mean then the projects you first talked about, the 4 million,
mhm.
those are the ones that would adjust our 10-year plan list?
So not necessarily. So since they are RPP, it does not necessarily need to be utilized on part of the 10-year plan list. And so, but they can be utilized for the 10-year plan list. And so it does not adjust your 10-year plan. It just is how we're allocating our RPP funding. Am I off base, Wendy?
Nope, you're good. So the 10-year conversation is yours to have basically with the TAC to say, are these still our priorities? And do we need to look at reshuffling the deck? Is there something you want to pull forward, something you want to move back? That's the initial conversation for the 10-year look.
All right, well, then I apologize to everybody because I believe I'm confused. So we'll just admit that and we'll move forward. So
Yeah, I'm now unconfused, but I feel like you guys should have added at least 3 more things to this agenda item just to make it complete.
yeah,
Okay.
because
Go ahead.
yeah, no, Wendy, Brandy, I agree because I think now we need to talk about the 10-year list. And so we don't have new lists. We have the old ones, Wendy. So we should look at the old ones and see if we want to change them. Is that the assignment?
And I'm going to let Kathleen jump in on that conversation.
And then wait, just so I'm totally clear, as if this isn't confusing enough. At the end of this, do you want 2 votes? Are we going to vote on the 10-year plan today? Or are we just talking about the 10-year plan?
You're
today?
just going to talk about the 10-year plan today, but I do need to have a TIP amendment for the faster projects for 2026. And it doesn't necessarily have to happen today. It can wait till next month, along with Shane's RPP changes.
Okay, I got it.
So Wendy or Brandy, you're correct. It probably should have been 3 separate agenda items.
I agree, but I get it now.
How about we just plan to do that next month then?
That'll be fine.
Okay, but let's discuss the 10-year plan since we're all here. And I know, Shane, you had some input on this last month. So I would love your input on it.
Mhm.
It doesn't look like what you presented last month, but if you remember what you presented last month, that'd be great.
Yeah, I guess I'm gonna, I have no problem going through that. I guess my question probably to Kathleen and or Wendy is, are we at that process, or are we at that point now to really have that discussion for the 10-year plan? Meaning, is that November or is that December?
I would say, this is what I understand, there's going to be better fiscally constrained information for the 10-year plan
Mhm.
in December.
Okay,
If you want to discuss your projects now based on your long-range plan or based
Yeah.
on what information you have now, you can
Okay.
start the conversations, but there is no solid fiscal constraint to really work with. That's what, that we would work with that in December. And then also, because I've been told by the TC or during a TC meeting that since the fiscal year 2022 program is very robust compared to previous years, that we may have a little more leeway. We were first thinking we wanted to have the 10-year plan projects prioritized by March, but now the talk is we may have a little leeway in this process because there's a lot of factors to consider, like the greenhouse gas. Let me pull up a slide that just so I can talk to it to you. Let's see.
Well, Kathleen is doing that. The final board meeting that I need to have to be able to finish any STIP entries would be the February board meeting. So as long as we have a final action on anything that we want to make changes to into the STIP process is February. So that's when I have to enter. And as long as I have them by mid-February and we can take the changes to our joint TPR meeting, then it can move forward. But if that is not the case, then there'll be changes after that draft document is made, and we can still do that through May if we need to. So not the end of the world, as Kathleen says. I mean, if we need to take a step back, we do have time. It's just I like to have everything done nice and neat so that we can share all the information, but if that isn't the way it works out, that isn't the way it works out.
And Wendy, is that faster in the 10-year plan or just faster?
Well, it would be everything that we can get accomplished by then. So it would be RPP, it would be faster, it would be any of the 260 funding. If there's something that's coming down that we have information on after the December conversation with the Transportation Commission, and Jeff has the ability to give us fiscal constraint. Does that make sense?
Yeah, in theory, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, in theory, the RPP and the faster are relatively set, correct?
Correct.
So really the only thing that has some variable to it is the 10-year plan.
Correct.
And then anything that comes out of 260.
Correct.
Okay, I got it.
So moving forward, at this point, there's not too much to discuss. We decided that this can be 3 separate items in December. So is that correct, CDOT? Because we want to be good, responsive partners.
I would love to vote on it. I would love to get the RPP and the faster out of the way so Wendy can work on it, so that can make it to the board, and that's not going to change. The painful part of this is the 10-year plan, and I think Kathleen was trying to pull something up to give us a bit of guidance. That way we don't have to mix all these together. We've got 2 that are easy and one that's hard. So if we get the 2 easy ones out of the way, then we don't have to worry about them or confuse people or think about it anymore unless Wendy says I have to.
Well, we really need to take them to the board. So, and
I know, but if I can get them out of the TAC, then you guys can get them to the board.
so are you guys okay with voting on what Shane has asked? I mean, I would never be presumptuous to have that be an ask without having the ability for the board to have weigh in on those projects before we move forward, because I think that would be
Right, but
bad.
that's my question. It's not going to change. We don't really have a lot of give.
Well, that's not necessarily true. They could. So as a TMA, you can always tell us no.
Right.
So
It just
If,
doesn't make sense to it that I can see.
right, if I may, I think the compromise might be this. Brandy, I think we all agree that the faster safety funds, because they go through Performance Directive 16, is not going to change. And it would be appropriate to go ahead and vote on that now, especially because this is on the agenda as an action item.
Yes,
For the
please.
next item, as far as Shane's RPP recommendation, Shane, if you could get us something in writing that we can send out to the board, we'll have that as the first, no, excuse me, the TAC. We'll have that as the first action item of the two action items. And I think unless someone says, well, we've looked at this and we really don't think that this should be a priority, we'd like to see something else. Otherwise, they can vote on that, and that would probably be a very quick vote. Then the third item, Brandy, I totally agree with you, is the 10-year plan. And that's going to be where there's a lot of debate. Last time I think we looked at the 10-year plan, we took airport and powers off of the reserve list and we moved it all the way up, and then now it's funded. So that is a very important discussion that we need to all have information well in advance of, and that we can look at and make sure that we're all comfortable with what we're moving from the reserve list onto the funded list, as well as adding new things onto that funded list, because that list now is going to get a little smaller. And I think Brian made a good point that we need to give equal attention to the transit list at that time. So Brandy, how about that for the compromise? We do one now, we do one as sort of a walkover next time. I don't want to use the word rubber stamp. People get offended by that. But that one will be easy. And then the third one will be the long discussion on the 10-year plan. Would that work for you?
Do you want to have the 10-year plan discussion in December or January?
Wendy, CDOT, are we ready to have that 10-year plan discussion in December, or did you say January, Brandy?
Yeah, I'm asking if we're gonna, I know we're gonna vote on RPP in December. Are we gonna vote on the 10-year plan in December as well, or January?
It sounded like Kathleen was looking something up, but it sounded like we have more time. So I think December would be a discussion meeting and January would be when we voted on it, but perhaps I misunderstood. So Kathleen or Wendy, can you confirm?
You're right. You're right.
That sounds perfect. And
You're right.
also, we have a tentative joint TPR MPO meeting, and I think that's going to be moved out to February. So at least that's what I've
correct.
heard.
Mid-February is what we're planning for. So that way we have all the board meetings already held, because we can't really have a joint TPR meeting unless we have concurrence on the process. So we need to wait until the board meetings happen. So it'll be mid-February.
Okay.
Okay.
And if you want, I have a couple slides that were showed to the stack as well as showed to one of your TPRs in your region. If you want me to share some of that, it kind of talks about the different bands of years that we would want to prioritize as part of the 10-year plan. And John, you've seen it at the stack meeting, but I don't know if you think that would be good to share with the group or not.
I didn't know there would be a test. I don't remember it.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Brandy would like to see it. So can we give her control, Jess? While that's getting called up, we did have a request here in the room that when we have these sort of very complicated spreadsheets that have multiple cogs on them, like PayCog and others, that we as PPACG staff sort of cut them down and only give you the relevant information. That I think that is a very good suggestion. And so in the future, when CDOT gives us something like that, we'll still give you the full picture so you can see what other cogs are doing, but we will create a new document that focuses in on just the PPACG information, so that way you guys can stay focused on that. And with that, Kathleen, go ahead and start sharing. Your
Sure.
slides up.
Okay, great. So what we're doing for the 10-year plan is we have fiscal years 19 through 22 figured out, and they're honoring the 10-year plan. And so we're good there, but what we're going to work with you on eventually is the 4-year priority list for the next years, looking at years 5 through 8 of the 10-year plan, plus the other 2 out years. Then what we want to do is reset the out years beyond 2026, 27 through 30, and figure out another segment of 4 years to consider to roll in. And then in order to make the whole plan 10 years longer, we need to roll in another 2. So the idea is to look at these 4 different bands, starting with number 2, which is 23 through 26 for the 10-year plan. And you can see at the bottom of the slide, it tells you what the fiscal constraint was at the time. It may have changed a lot, but this is what we knew before. And this is what we took to stack. Years 1 through 4, we anticipated 750 million a year for those 4 years. For years 5 through 8, we had 500 million a year assumed. And then for years 9 through 12, we're estimating right now about 0.8 billion or 200 million a year. So let me see if I can progress these slides and you can experience that. So for each region, we have the number of projects that are unfunded or still being worked on, because the good news is most of the 4-year program has already been started or completed. And then these are what are in region 2 that we have listed as still need to work on. So, but they're, so we have the I-25 through Pueblo and some transit projects. And I'll go through the other regions quickly. Well, let's see if I can get let me get the screen a little better, if I can get my mouse in the right spot. There we go. So the idea is we're supposed to, before we would prioritize a list of projects, we would think about how things have changed. In 2019, we did a large effort to prioritize projects for the 2045 statewide plan, and we want to still honor that for the most part. We don't want to reinvent the wheel or anything like that. So we want to look to that first, but then consider what changes have occurred since then. What do we want to remove? What do we want to add? And then what are some modifications or clarifications on projects that are already on the list somehow? Then what we did is staff at HQ decided it would be good to have definitions for the modifications and clarifications. And of course, the most substantial changes are project removal and project addition. And we consider these substantial enough that they will need a vote of the MPO or TPR areas in order to change them on the list, to add them or delete them. And that would be adding brand new or deleting something in its entirety for the most part. Then we have the other changes that are considered more administrative, but we would still do them in coordination with you. Project clarification, just a change in a project description and termini, just minor changes. And then modifications, they could be major changes in funding or termini based on the fiscal constraint that we get. And then also adding other modes of transport to a project because of the greenhouse gas work we're doing, or even going to a point where if there's enough money or things can work out, you could combine projects where the termini don't change, and they are considered project modifications. Any questions so far? Okay. Okay. So once we nail down how things have changed, we would consider these things. There's a lot going on at the department, but the TC just discussed some changes to the guiding principles to incorporate greenhouse gas rulemaking changes, also equity, diversity, and inclusion changes to the guidance. So they would be like our North Star of how we select projects. We also need to consider the greenhouse gas rulemaking process. We need to consider project readiness and the sequencing of projects in terms of how we move forward with them. Are they in the right sequence considering project readiness? Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and you can see my screen okay? Because I'm looking at a different screen than the one I'm moving along. So, but anyway.
Yep, we're good.
Excellent. Okay, we also want to make sure we respect your planning cycles. And then, like I said before, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We definitely want to rely on what you prioritized last time back in 2019. We have to consider the color of money. We do believe we're going to keep the rural paving program alive for this next round of 4 years of projects. Of course, we're going to want to promote or emphasize multimodal options and transit goals with this as well. And then availability of funding partnerships. We want to leverage dollars where we can. And then just once again, we'll definitely need to reflect the modifications of the list before we would prioritize. So that's all just common sense. So the next step is that we're going to reevaluate everything in terms of fiscal constraint. We're going to go back to the stack next month and have some information for you too as well, depending on the timing of the stack versus the TAC, but I think it all works out. We'll look at regional equity across the state and how the fiscal constraint reaches across the different bands of years that I presented earlier. And then we are going to continue to meet with you in the TPR areas across the state and the other MPOs. So that's pretty much what we're thinking. And then you guys, if you're really familiar with what you've already prioritized, this is just in a way an opportunity to get your creative juices flowing and get prepared for this prioritization process. But the initial intent was to get this wrapped up before the construction season. But now the word is that because construction season for fiscal year 22 is so good that we can take a little bit more time, but we still want to move forward with this 10-year prioritization process. So if you have questions beyond about what I just presented, feel free to raise them.
Hey, Kathleen, this is John. I did actually have to leave the stack meeting, so I did not see this presentation. I was scheduled to do the Rotary Club presentation, so I actually had to leave before this was presented. I am curious when you say about the regional equity, has anything changed as far as how the funds are distributed across the 5 CDOT regions, or has that been changed at all?
I think it's still the same. Rebecca mentioned I don't really like this term, the split the baby formula, where we blended RPP formulas from the past where that benefited rural areas, and then the other formula that benefited urban areas and blended them. And that's what we're continuing to use, the same as we used the last time and for program distribution and things like that. So, yeah.
So the only thing that's changing is the MMOF calculation with their disadvantaged communities versus elderly and disabled, correct? That's the only change?
Yeah, I think that's the only change. And then just figuring out what we expect from the infrastructure bill and from any changes that the greenhouse gas rulemaking might make on numbers. Well, I don't think they will, but those are the other factors. But this is what we're doing. So as Richard Zamora said at a TPR meeting for Southeast TPR, he said, we're just trying to wet your whistle to get prepared for this conversation. And we won't know as much until we get the fiscal constraint.
So Kathleen, if I repeat this back to you, what I'm thinking I heard, and you can tell me if I'm completely wrong, you're going to take the current 10-year list that we have and reevaluate it based upon the criteria that you just went through? And then are you going to give us our own list back with changes, or are you going to wait till we have a list and then run it through this criteria?
Well, what I understand, and Wendy and Shane, you can tell me if I'm right, but it sounded like region staff will look at what's what and have their own recommendations. But it might be wise for you guys to take a look and think about what your recommendations might be. And then we can come together and discuss what you're seeing as priorities versus what Region 2 staff is seeing as priorities.
But is Region 2 staff going to evaluate our current projects based upon the presentation that you just made?
I'm gonna say I would think to some degree, yes, but I would think that would be true, that the region's gonna look at everything, knowing fiscal constraint across the state and what they're getting, and figure out what they're gonna do and bring their recommendations to you.
Shane, do you see that changing substantially from what we have as our old list to what Kathleen just presented?
Not a whole lot. When it comes to whatever we get for our controlling total for our fiscal constraint, I mean, that's really going to dictate what we can pull onto the list, and the other option we have is what we can substitute from the list. And so if you go back and look at our 10-year list, we had 8 projects total on our 10-year list. 4 of them are completely funded and through construction. Airport and Powers is being funded through 260. The 24 East, which is on that second tier, is being funded for design through 260. I'm sorry, Airport and Powers is only being funded right now in design through 260. And so it's really looking at, are there any projects on that second tier that we want to, 1, either substitute to, or 2, if our controlling total changes, that we can add to. And so I think that's really going to be the exercise for PPACG, to my understanding.
You're not going to run them through the greenhouse gas rules or
Yeah. Well, and that's a whole can of worms that I don't know.
Right, and that's my question is, I don't want us to go through a ton of brain damage to rank it the way we always have, only to have it go through a different set of criteria, get turned completely on its head, and we're starting all over again.
My understanding is the rules are supposed to come out in December. I think that's what I've heard, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, they're supposed to be adopted by the TC next month.
Yeah.
I would love to wait until that takes place unless anyone objects, because it could change how we rank these completely.
Right.
Sadly.
Right.
And that's entirely true. So that's why we've moved everything out a bit, and I say that we won't have our final vote until February. So that'll give us enough time to look at all the different aspects and all the influences that there could be on the process. So I think that that's a great decision and a great way to look at it.
So yes, I'm sorry, go ahead, Brandon.
Go ahead, Shane.
Oh, I was going to say, so once we get the greenhouse rules and understand kind of how that impacts it, yes, region staff will take a look at your PPACG list, really that second tier of projects, and see how they fit in. And then we'll also have options for you as far as if you want to substitute in based off of what we've heard from other areas. And I'll give the example, the 3-lane section of South Academy to Circle versus the HOV lanes on I-25. That's an example. And then on top of that, depending on what the control total is that we get for PPACG, if that expands that list, then we'll have our recommendations, for instance, Milton Proby Parkway or what have you, to be put on the bottom of the list if it falls within that control total range. And so those, and assuming how it fits in with the greenhouse gas. But that will be our exercise in the region, is looking at how that fits together. We'll come to you with information. You guys will be able to digest it over a month, 2 months, whatever it is that we get, and then ultimately vote on it later in the spring.
So John, the only way I might amend our timeline that you presented is if these rules haven't been put in place by the time of our PPACG meeting or our TAC meeting, or you don't have enough time to put this together because the rules haven't been finalized, that might push it to January.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate. The only thing that I wanted to add is, again, remember that there are two lists. There's the transit list and then there's the roadway list. I think the roadway list, since I don't work for CDOT, I think I can be more blunt. Look, you're going to be you put together a list of what your real needs are. And if the state legislature does not allow you to implement those needs, I think that needs to be documented. I think we need to be able to say, we have a list of projects that cannot be done because of these rules. If we take that list and we water it down so that it is more compliant, I'm not sure that that's doing anything for our long-term goals of moving mobility projects forward. So I totally agree with you, and I think that's a fine way of doing it. But I would just encourage you all, as you're developing your roadway list, realize that whatever your needs are, and the list should reflect that. And if we only get to do one project off of that because of the new rules, then that's what happens. And then that's what needs to be portrayed back to the public, not that we don't have any needs because we've got our total list funded. There is this other list, this transit list, that we will probably get much further down and fund more fully given the new rules. And again, I think that's what's appropriate, not necessarily making the legislator's job easier to implement their agenda. So that's just my 2 cents, whatever that's worth, probably less than 2 cents. But yes, I think that would be appropriate, Brandy, to vote on the one issue now, have the next issue be rubber stamped or fast tracked in December on the RPP, and then only talk about the 10-year plan in December if we have enough information. Otherwise, we'll bring it back in January. If that's what you're saying, I totally agree.
Yes, I think that's perfect.
Okay. Is there a motion on the table there to then approve the faster list as presented with the proposed amendment?
There isn't, but I could make one.
Okay, Brandy.
I agree that we approve the faster list as presented in item 6A.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
This is Tim Roberts. I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor of passing the motion as said by Brandy, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes, approving the faster safety amendment. Thank you.
I have one more question. So based on what you said, then can we discuss transit in December, John?
Yeah, if Jeff and
If Jeff and Brian are cool with that, yeah, we can definitely bring that forward. I get a thumbs up from Jeff. Do I get a thumbs up from Brian? Got a thumbs up? Yes, we'll definitely have the transit list at least in December. And then the roadway list will either probably be more than likely in January.
All right, thank you.
Okay,
Oh, and for the record, Mr. Chair, the discussion that we just had that lasted an hour, in the minutes will say the committee discussed. There's no way Jess could ever, yes, there's no way, just so everyone's clear.
Oh, come on, I'm sure she got every word.
I think Zoom actually has a speech to text.
That's right. If you really want, just
Yeah.
watch the video. There's no way we can ask her to capture.
Okay,
all that.
anything else from CDOT?
No.
Hey, Dole.
Nope.
So this is Brian Vituli. So John and Jeff, just to let you know, well, let everybody know, I will miss the December TAC meeting. So I'm not sure how we want to handle discussion of the transit list, but I'm not going to be around that week.
Do you want us to wait, Brian?
I get if it could. Sure, that would be great.
I think you're critical to that discussion, Brian.
Yeah, we were just trying to make it easier for you, but if you're not going to be there, that doesn't help.
Yeah.
You don't take your car into the shop and they say, well, our engine guy's out this week. It's like, I insist you fix my engine now, right? You're not going to like the product you get. So we'll do everything in January then, if that's the pleasure of the committee.
And you'll be fine to do that. So any decisions we need to make, we have enough time to do. But at that January discussion, whatever comes out of it, we'll have to have that as a recommendation to go to the board in February. If we need to have it included in the current STIP and TIP process, okay?
Okay, that sounds great. Thanks, everyone.
No problem.
Brian, how about you let Jessica know before the agenda comes out, just in case your office decides to send someone on your behalf or something?
Sure. Yeah, I think between Tim and Gail and Craig, if need be, if it has to be moved up, we can cover it. But if we could wait until January, that would be awesome.
But let's just do that then.
Yeah,
We'll
wait.
plan for that unless
Yeah.
something
Done.
puts that out of the realm of possibilities. We'll just plan for that, okay?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. All right, let's go back up to agenda item number 3.
What? Wait, what? Huh?
So let me ask one question before we move on. So we can let Shane go, right?
Yeah, well, we could never really let Shane
Yeah,
go.
Shane, have safe travels.
Shane's in our blood. We love Shane.
Thanks,
But
guys.
yes,
Appreciate your time.
We can
Bye,
part
Shane.
momentarily. Thanks, Shane. I'll see you on Monday.
All right, safe travels.
All right. Item number 3, public comments. I think, Mr. Chair, the only thing that I have under public comments is we wanted to introduce Casey Fortman, our other new PPACG employee. So, hey, Casey, come up to the microphone. Let's embarrass you. I mean, have you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. I'm Casey Fortman. I think I've met a few of you, but I'm newish here to PPACG, acting as the GIS planner. I come from Tetra Tech and have worked with a few of the folks here, but happy to be here. Nice to meet everybody.
Okay, any other public comments? Let's get to approval of the minutes from October 21st meeting. Can I ask for a motion on to approve those minutes?
This is Brian. I move approval of the minutes from last month.
Thank you, Brian. Do we have a second?
This is Sally. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the meeting minutes from the October 21st meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed,
Aye.
say nay. All right, motion passes. Minutes are approved. All right, John, Board of Directors report, please.
So the Board of Directors, when they met last month, under the action items, they had the greenhouse gas emissions rulemaking. So we discussed the changes from the rule and introduced our proposed follow-up letter, which was approved by the board. We had a discussion on the budget. And I think under the information items, there was the work program update. So very light on transportation last month, Mr. Chair. Happy to answer any questions about the board meeting, or if other folks were at the board meeting and have other observations, happy to entertain them now.
Okay. We will skip action 6. Just kidding.
No,
Yeah.
Shane was like, hey, so is this going to be a quick meeting? I'm like, there's only 3 items. It should go pretty quick. It was the kiss of death. I shouldn't have said it. So I apologize to
Every time.
everybody.
All right, we'll take away the mic from John.
It's
Fedor-
Murphy's Law. You know how that goes.
That's right.
And that
Let's
was not
do-
3 items. That was 3 items in 1 item.
Yes.
I didn't know.
All right, John, actually, if you want to talk about the tip update.
I can talk about the tip update. So the FY 23-27 tip went out for public comment. The public comment period closed on Friday. There were 2 open houses, a virtual open house held October 25th and a hybrid in-person and virtual public open house held here on November 4th. We received no public comments at this point. And our next step will be to move to the public hearing with the Board of Directors in December. I believe that's on the 8th.
Easy enough. Thank you.
Nope, I think this committee gets to see the whole project one more time to recommend adoption. And hopefully at this point, we hope you would. But yeah, you've seen it month after month for the last 3 or 4 months. So hopefully at this point, if anyone had a problem, they would have brought it up. But officially, I think you get to see it one more time. The board, like Danelle said, will get their public hearing in December, and then hopefully it will be adopted in January, I believe. Is that the schedule? Yep.
Yes, sir.
Is that comment that received no public comments like that? Is that fairly common?
Yeah, especially since, remember, we had back-to-back tips, right?
Yeah.
So we had the first tip
Okay.
where we sort of wore everybody out. And then we came back a few months later and said, hey, we need to have alignment with this. We're going to do it again. So I think anybody that was super excited about it would have already participated in the first one. So, and especially in the 3 years I've been here, we never receive lots of comments. It's always just 2 or 3, and it's usually folks that are particularly interested in one thing, or what I like to call the transportation groupies, right? The folks that are interested, and they'll show up and they'll tell you about their pet projects, and that'll be that. So I was not surprised.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if you want to also update us on programming some of these additional funds.
Thank you. And then if we could go to the next one. This is, if you recall, I think last month, and I could be mistaken, it might have been 2 months ago, but I'm pretty sure it was last month, we did receive the email from El Paso County saying that they were going to be returning some TAP funds. We asked Wendy and CDOT to sort of double check to make sure that we had all of the funding amounts correct moving forward. So good news, bad news, or knock, knock, who's there? Well, it's not opportunity. Unfortunately, when we had the reconciliation, that funding of the TAP funding, as you can see on the screen, basically went to reconcile the program. That's again, reconciling estimates versus actuals. So our estimates were higher than our actuals. And it turned out it was a good thing that El Paso County returned that project, because basically, as you can see on the screen, we've only got like $9,000 of TAP funds available.
Is it
The
just
good
my
news.
screen that has nothing on it, or does anybody else see what John's talking about?
Oh, is the screen? Oh, well, thanks for, yeah. She's got to switch the screens, I think.
Thank you.
Sorry, Brandy, you had to be here to see it.
Yeah,
I
it was
believe
awesome.
I don't doubt it. I'm quality controlling from home, though.
Can you guys see that now?
Coming. There it is.
All right. All right. So yeah, so then that there's only really $9,000 left in TAP. However, the good news is when Wendy went to go check the seat cushions for funding, she found that there were final vouchers and other return funds back to the region to the tune of about $480,811. So the reason why we had this item on the agenda was for me to say, hey, how do we want to handle, well, and when we say you all on the TAC, the 480, do we do applications with a workshop, applications, and then just bring it back to the meeting? Are you allowing new projects? Is it existing projects only? What's the process? We did receive an email from Brian from Mountain Metro that said that there's going to be another 50,000 that they're going to be returning. But Wendy, you're not sure that 50,000 isn't already included in this, or has other things that might eat it up. Is that correct?
So
or were you
I
talking about the
don't-
full 480?
I don't know. The 480 is available. It's still available in the report that I ran today. So I would say that the information that Brian has now may not be fully processed through the business office at this point. And so I'm not seeing anything at this point that I can actually say that is available. And I don't know if Brian can help add any insight into that conversation. I don't know if, did you just award a project, or are you done with the project, or where is that funding coming from?
Yeah,
That
so
way
this,
it'll give me a better idea.
sure, this is a fairly old bus stop accessibility project. It was Route
Okay.
6.
Okay.
We actually did an amendment a couple of years ago because we wanted to do a routing change. So we had
Okay.
to go through the approval to have it on a different segment of roadway. So this is finally a project that was completed just a little while ago. I mean,
Okay.
it may be either closed out already or going through the process now, but I know this has been on my list to kind of formally return to PPACG but as far as I guess I can look in to see where it is, or if there's anything else that you want me to do, please let me know.
So LaShawn might be able to tell us and something about it. I don't know whether that it's been, so there's a process that has to happen to close out a project to be able to take any of the surplus funds out of it. And it has to go through that whole process before they let us take the funds out. So I'm not sure where we're at in that process. So that would probably be a LaSalle question, maybe, or maybe the business office to get a final good answer on it. But normally we don't reprogram something until it's back in the pool and that I can verify that it's back in the pool. And I have one more question before we move off of the subject. The El Paso County money that was returned was 2023 money, right? John?
I don't remember.
I think it's 2023 money. So you have 300,000 of federal plus this 9,772. I'm pretty sure it's 2023 money that they returned. This is only 2022 money that I gave you the dollars on.
Oh, okay. So if I'm hearing you correctly, that means the 480,811 is what's available in federal fiscal year 22.
Or
And-
the MPP, yes. Mhm.
Right, for the MPP. And then the CDOT money, excuse me, the El Paso County money would not be included in that because that is a 22 balance. And that would come later. Is that what you're saying?
They've given it back and I just need to have something from, have you taken that to the board yet? Did that go in this month, earlier this month?
I don't understand the question. I'm sorry.
So did you take the 300,000 to the board to have the board act upon that to give it back to the pool?
We don't normally take things to the board to do that. If there's money in the pool, there's money in the pool. We program it and then that's what we take to the board. We don't need to.
In the past, whenever we had money that was given back, it went through a board action to give it back. But if you're not doing that anymore, then that's perfectly fine. But I haven't taken it out of the project because I didn't get anything official like we would with the tip amendment to tell me that it was okay to take it back. So have you removed it from the tip yet?
No, I guess I didn't. Like I said, are we talking about the El Paso County
Yeah.
dollars?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, that is wherever it was sitting. And again, I think, like you said, that was 23 money. So that's probably still in process. I can't remember, quite frankly, if that had already been put in or not. So I was under the impression it was probably from the draft tip, but yeah, if that's what you're talking about, that the El Paso County dollars, yes, if it's on a project, we would come up with a new project and we would do a tip amendment, moving it from the old El Paso County Jackson Creek over to the new project. So yes, if that's what you're talking about, we have not done that yet. So I was confused. I thought you were talking about the money that's in the pool. So if there's money that's in a pool, there's no projects associated with it. So we haven't touched that.
Okay, so normally in order for me to return something back to the pool that's programmed in a project that's being given back, we need to have a paper trail of that to show how that came into be. So that's all I was asking is if a paper trail's been established so that I can take that project out of the STIP. Because I
Okay.
can't just arbitrarily do that.
Right. Now that I understand what you're saying, I agree. And yes, we can do that. I think the one thing that I have to make sure is my recollection, and I could be wrong, was that the Jackson Creek Parkway project was TAP funding. And so we can't switch apples and oranges. We might just have to cancel that TAP project, put the money back in the pool to take care of the reconciliation actuals versus estimates. And I think
No.
No, it was
You're
STP
good.
dollars.
You're good. What I have here is already good. So the 2022 numbers are already have your reconciliation taken into consideration.
All
So
right.
the $300,000 is not touched.
Okay. So I guess bottom line, a number for the committee at this point, do we feel comfortable that there is $311,000 of STP Metro available for reprogramming? And if that's the case, then the question to the committee is, how would you like to do that? Knowing that there might be more money coming later. Is that what we're saying, Wendy?
So you have 480,811 in STP federal, and technically you have 309,772 of TAP. Based on the return from El Paso County.
Okay, so we can go, you're comfortable with us reprogramming $480,811.
As long as you don't need it for your transit study.
I will, well, that let the cat out of the bag. I will bring that up next. All right. Well,
Oh, I
thanks,
still
Wendy.
want you to make a commitment that we're going to make you short in the end.
Right. Well, thank you. All right. So, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I apologize for any confusion. I guess I should have had that ironed out in advance. I take responsibility for that. So, but in the end, right now you have $480,811 that is available for reprogramming. And we as staff is looking from direction from you as the TAC committee, how you would like to move forward in doing that. The only thing that is not optionable, that is not option, that isn't something you can not do, is applications. We need to get we need to have an application process. But after that, as far as do you want to have a workshop? Do you want to bring it back to a TAC committee? And as far as the deadline, do you want to make it in January? Do you want to make it in December? Do you want to do it in February? All of that is up to you, but we do need to get applications. That's the question in front of you, and we are working with the number 48011. As Wendy had mentioned, one other quick thing that we want to talk about is that PPACG is short on local dollars. We have federal dollars, but we don't have local dollars because of the pandemic. When the federal government was just handing out money to everybody for this, that, and the other thing, MPOs were not on the Christmas list. It did not rain Benjamins down over in here, as the kids say. And the AAA was limited in the amount of volunteers. So they would have a lot of volunteers here at the AAA that would do things. Their time would be noted, and then they would receive in-kind match dollars for that. Obviously, with the pandemic, we lost all those match dollars. In addition, we had a lot of money flow through the organization. So we've been working with Mountain Metro Transit to say, hey, for our upcoming specialized human services transit plan that we're required to do in 2022, can we work with you guys to do that? We'll switch over some of our federal administration dollars, 100,000 to do that. So then the idea came up that, well, instead of us trying to figure out the morass of regulations and CDOT everything to move money from our planning budget over to MMT, because there was money coming back, how would the committee feel about making the recommendation, not necessarily that it would be approved by the board of taking $100,000 of STP dollars and giving it to Mountain Metro to do the study. And to be clear, one, it's saving PPACG that money. Two, that's money that you could be spending on other projects, roadways and whatever. So it's not like PL money where you have to spend it on planning. This is money that you would consciously be making to say, we're going to move it from a construction project over to do a study. And three, again, in theory, I've got money in another pot. It's just how do we figure out how to move it over to that other pot? So I just don't want anyone to come back later and say, well, gee, you asked us for money, we gave you money, but how come you didn't do this? Well, those are all options and those are all things. So that's the cards on the table. If that's something you guys are willing to consider, Brian will put in the ask, but if it's a no from the get-go, I'd rather that Brian not have to go through all the work of putting together an application. So Brian, did I tactfully put that away you're comfortable with?
Tactfully, yes. Since we are the TAC, you did it very tactfully.
Ah,
kind of good.
It was task-esque.
John, is there a timeline on any of this?
Wendy, help me out. These are $22. So we need to obligate them by September of 22. Is that correct?
They can roll forward if we need to.
Okay, so then there's no time limit.
No, there's no emergency to get it done.
So
I mean,
Wendy,
I'm a little uncomfortable that you brought it for direction, but it's not something we're voting on. And I think that how we're going to distribute these funds should be something we're voting on so that in the future, no one can say, I didn't agree. I just think it's a big discussion item for a discussion as opposed to you're asking for direction. And generally it's easier to give direction with a motion.
right, I think,
Go ahead.
yeah, no, you're right. I think the only direction we're really looking for is you tell us when you want to bring this back. Is it January? Is it February? And do you want a workshop? I think those are the only directions we're really looking at.
Okay, well, that seems plenty vague enough. Has someone mentioned the option of using this money to fund projects that aren't fully funded?
Yeah, everyone help me out with that. I think for the longest time, we were saying that with the funds that we have available, it was no new projects. We would only fund projects that were out there that had a shortfall. But I seem to remember that the last time we had some funds come available, that was lifted and we were funding things that were new. But I think you could go back to only funding shortfall projects if you'd like. And if anyone has a different memory, please tell me.
Right, that's the input that I think I'd like from the group, because that's kind of the bigger decision. I'm pretty sure our policy is still in place, that the plan is to backfill projects that need funding. But if we want to change that, we need to have a conversation about that.
Yeah, Brandy and John, this is Gail. So I really call the same thing, but if it's an existing project, I think, we still want to have a call to see if there's an additional need for projects that have a shortfall, and they would be considered first. But if we feel like we're not in that spot, and John, I know we kind of thought we were maybe past that for a short term, that we need to look at an additional call. So for example, some of the new projects we've got programmed, I know some of them are underfunded. Should we consider those for new applications?
But you're still saying they're underfunded, correct, Gail?
I am still saying they're underfunded, but I'd want to address the ones that were underfunded upfront that are in the nearer term years. I guess within that, 1 to 3 year, if we know there's a need, and then we have those new ones we've just programmed in fiscal years 25 through 27 that we know we underfunded right now. And then the entity could put an application in to state and document what that underfund need would be.
Okay, does anybody want to open this for brand new projects, or do we all want to do it for projects that need additional funds? Anybody have a brand new project they're dying to fit in 400,000 / 300,000 / anywhere in between?
This is Brian. I agree. I think we should, take care of the projects that are underfunded first and then go to new projects if it comes to that.
So then, Brian, would you go through the tactful effort to include the transit plan in that process?
I guess if that's the only option to coordinate with PPACG so we can continue to do that jointly funded transit specialized transportation plan. I guess we will be putting in for that, but yeah, so that just kind of takes care of what I just said, and that's a total opposite of what I just said. But I don't know, John, if there's other options we can pursue. I'm totally
I figured out how to make it transparent and yet get the end result that you guys are looking for.
right.
Yeah, no, I think we'll figure it out. And so I think what I'm hearing is that we're being directed as staff to send out an email to all of the jurisdictions of a notice of funding availability in the amount of $480,811 with priority given to projects that are already underway within the region, seeking additional funds to cover shortfalls. And then do we want to have a deadline for that in December and talk about it at the December TAC meeting? Or do you want the deadline to be in January and have the funding just discussed at the January TAC meeting? What's your preference on timeline?
I'm okay with January because I don't think I'm going to catch up from going on vacation probably until February. So I think January will give us more time during the holidays if there's no rush per se. And then Wendy, I'm going to admit it, I have no idea what that 300,000 is that you're talking about. Is that coming now, later, or does that fit in the 480,000?
So that's not part of the 480,000 at all. El Paso County submitted a request to give back money for a project that they have programmed in 2023. So they're giving back $300,000 of federal TAP funds.
Do we want to do all that at the same time, or do we want to separate these and have two separate calls for projects? Does it matter either way for staff, either CDOT or PPACG?
It doesn't matter to CDOT. So, I mean, whatever you decide is fine with us.
Anybody have a preference?
Let's just do January.
Yeah, well, my question is, do we want to combine the 300 and the 400,000, or do you just want to have those particular chips fall where they may?
I mean, I could see that going two ways. Maybe by then we have confirmation of the funds. And if the funds do show up, we could just reach deeper onto that list once we put our requests in, because I'm sure the request will exceed the amount of available funds.
Yeah, that was my thought as well, Dole.
And that'll give me some time to figure out where Brian's 50,000 is at.
Brian's dying to know. All right, so that'll work?
Yep.
And Brian, I just wanted to confirm, since we've kind of lined out a plan, it doesn't create any other issues or challenges for you, correct?
Yeah, we have some time. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And so just to repeat back to make sure I get the direction correct, we are going to work with Wendy to find out the disposition of the $300,000 in TAP. Once we have that, and not before, we will send out a single notice of funding availability for $480,811 of STP and $309.27 of TAP. Once we have those numbers, we'll send that out. We'll give you a deadline. And then the next TAC meeting, which would probably be the February TAC meeting, is when we would schedule it. And asking for the applications to come back prior to the agenda release. And so we can include the applications in it. Is that the direction we've been given? Because if it is, I actually understand it and can do it. Yes, John, that's great. Go ahead and do it.
It sounds good to me, John.
Sounds good.
John, I think you summarized it with all what I heard from the discussion.
Got it? Because I'm going to make you through all the work. All right.
Okay.
Subject to change in December as always.
I can do what you said.
What was that, Brandy?
I said, sounds lovely, and I said, it's subject to change in December as always.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
You know,
Let's move
it's
on.
like when the athlete says that, you know, they're day to day, aren't we all?
High ankle sprain. Okay, member entity announcements. Any announcements that anyone would like to make? Okay. Any other items that need to be added to the future TAC meetings that we have not discussed today?
Yeah, but I thought it was going to be a quick 3 items, really 3 items. I was like, well, it'd be a quick meeting. We'll be done.
CDOTS was really 3 by itself.
Yeah, so that was probably my downfall.
Sneaky item.
There was a couple of things that I wanted to mention, but quite frankly, my brain's a little scattered right now. I do know that Danelle and Casey are going to try to start working on an electrification plan, because the state has the electrification enterprise. And if we have a regional electrification plan on the books, we will have a better opportunity, especially the smaller jurisdictions to actually get a hold of that money. So we want to start working on that. So as far as an announcement's concerned, and then we'll probably bring it back to the TAC at a later date saying, hey, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it, probably months away. But if anyone has any input on that electrification issue and things you might like to see, give Danelle and Casey a call and let them know. I know that I think Colorado Springs was in the middle of doing one or has finished one, and we'll kind of go from there. The other thing is there was a new federal transportation funding bill that was released. So there's a lot of stuff in it and a lot of opportunities. I believe of the 1.5 billion or whatever, about 2/3 of it is in the form of competitive grant opportunities like build and infra and other stuff. So we'll put together probably another workshop like we did with the GHG rules and kind of go over all of the things that are in the new bill. So be looking forward to that. I don't think that it'll be a specific item back to TAC, but it might be. So I mentioned it here, but in either case, TAC will definitely be invited to that workshop when it happens.
Hey, Dole, this is Brian. Can I just say something real quick? John, some time ago through a state call for grant applications, we submitted a zero emission vehicle transition planning grant application to the state. From what we've heard, there are not a whole lot of applications in for that, so we're pretty hopeful that we will get that. So, if there's some coordination that we could do with Danelle and Casey on your plan, we should probably do that, I guess. And I'll let you know as soon as we know if we're successful or not.
You're getting the thank you head nod.
Okay, great.
Sally, are you going to be here in December?
Yes, I am.
So we can all say goodbye and good luck and congratulations.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, just checking.
Hopefully I'll have my replacement as well, so I can introduce her.
That would be wonderful.
Are you coming to the meeting in person? Should I have snacks?
No, I don't think we'll make the trip down the hill. But thank you.
Okay, anything else?
I have a
All right,
quick question. Oops, sorry, I have a quick question. For the applications, are we doing them electronically or are you going to email us the applications to apply?
I think if I remember correctly, you guys fill out the applications more often than I do. We email a spreadsheet and you fill in your information and you hit save and rename it and send it back.
Okay.
So I think it's
perfect.
all electronic if I remember correctly. That's
Okay.
right. And Debbie, did you get your TAP question answered that we
Yes.
talked about?
Yeah, so I will fill out the application and go from there.
All right, thank you.
Yep, thank you. Just another question. We're just curious. We're just brainstorming ideas. We had a meeting for State Road 105 and it's a CDOT road and we just want to do a corridor study. And we're trying to see how much that would cost and if there's any funds to help with that. That was my question regarding that. But I think more funds are coming in soon, so it could wait, that project, because you just mentioned about more funds.
And that's not a new project, so.
Yes,
What's
and
that?
it's a new project.
Yeah.
And that's why I didn't mention it
Yeah.
earlier because of that.
So yeah, that would be after the others. But if it's a CDAT project, you might want to talk to Shane or Wendy.
Yeah,
about it
I think
sooner.
Shane talked to one of my staff members about it and they wanted me to bring it up here, but now that the applications are for current projects, not new projects, we'll be waiting for the additional funds that are coming next.
Okay, thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everyone. Happy
Thank
Thanksgiving.
you. Happy
Thank you, everyone.
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.